Today's Toy Spot, we are looking at an extremely large toy. Today we're having a look at the Jakks Pacific Giant Size Godzilla. This Godzilla stands at a whopping 40 inches long. 40 inches long and quite considerably tall as well. Jakks Pacific actually has had a history of producing large size pieces, ranging anywhere from wrestling figures to Star Wars figures. They're really known for hitting the market with large pieces like this. And Godzilla, of all the pieces that I could possibly think of that would make sense as a large-scale item, Godzilla definitely would be it, bar none. To see what we've gotten with the Godzilla toys for the new movie have been impressive, but in the back of Spot's mind, I've always been thinking to myself, you know what, I really wish some toy company would give us an extremely large Godzilla. Something that, for example, this boy up at the top corner there is extremely excited. This Godzilla is about the size of his dog, maybe even a little bigger than his dog. So I'm really impressed to see that we have gotten something so large as what we have. Down below it's Godzilla, nice large image of Godzilla. And I know some people probably aren't super keen on the design of Godzilla. He's a little heftier than what he was, but I thought as a whole the movie was quite good. This comes to us again from the folks over at Jakks Pacific. You'll also notice too that Spot's taken the liberty of doing this on a different area of reviewing, just because it is so large. To do it on my regular backdrop would be next to impossible. We spin around the side of the box here, and we have some nice artwork of Godzilla. The poor cityscape way down below there. I don't know what's going to happen to them, but I'm sure it's not going to be good. And then on the back of the box, the read-up for this giant-sized Godzilla says possibly the last of the ancient species of giant amphibious creatures that evolved at the time when the surface of the Earth was over 10 times more radioactive than it is today. Godzilla can convert his radiation stores into a violent, focused exhalation of atomic ray. Rarely seen but spoken of in ancient Pacific Island myths, Godzilla was spotted in 1954 when the U.S. Navy encountered and attempted to kill it with an atomic blast in the Pacific Ocean. Since then, the giant creature has been living in the deep ocean until a threat to his survival from an ancient foe forces him to reappear. Features of this Godzilla is the fact that the Godzilla toy, the jaw opens and closes, it's fully posable, and tail swings back and forth. To certainly check out more from Jakks Pacific, you can head over to their website at www.jackspacific.com, and you can also head over to their YouTube channel as well, where you can see some fantastic pieces, including, and not limited certainly to, this ginormous Godzilla. Spot's going to take a break, get this opened up, and if you think this is large now, just wait until we get the tail and everything on top of it snapped in, and you'll see how large this Godzilla certainly is. There's definitely more heading your way, guys. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Okay, so when you get Godzilla out of packaging, he comes in a couple of separate pieces from one another. He has the main body, the main Godzilla piece, and then he's got these standalone tails, and those pieces come together, and then you snap it onto the back of Godzilla. One thing to note, though, before snapping the tail into place, is that I noticed that there is a battery plate cover that's on the bottom underside of the tail. This is basically where the tail is going to be going into place. My guess is that along those lines, at some point, Jakks Pacific considered the idea of making this a possibly just a sound effect monster, probably a button that you could press on Godzilla to activate several different sounds, possibly even lights as well. Further evidence of that theory is the fact that Godzilla, right on the underside stomach area, there's a couple of slit holes, which would ideally be used for a speaker system. So my guess is that Jakks initially had this planned for a sound effect creature, and then ultimately just decided not to incorporate it. Already seeing how big Godzilla is, to incorporate things such as sound effects, I could see where cost would be probably a little more of an issue. And they could really have put this out of too high of a price point that children would be able to pick this up as, gifts or getting them picked up for themselves. So I can see why Jakks Pacific probably abandoned the idea. Keeping, really, for me, if I was looking at this and I was buying this for myself as a child, I could see why. The novelty of Godzilla here is the fact that he is just incredibly large. He is the ideal size for a Godzilla toy. That sound effects could really be an afterthought, and if it's like a difference of $20 to $25 more just to get him to make sound effects, I can see it's a very smart move on Jakks Pacific's end that they didn't include the sound effects, making him a much more cost-effective Godzilla toy for people to be picking up. As Spot had mentioned, the tail is comprised of two components. You have the much larger tail, and you can also see where the tail will move back and forth, one of the gimmicks that the toy has. On the very end, there is a peg hole, and you will take the other end of the tail. Yes, there is even more tail to add on to this long tail, but you're going to take this piece, and you're going to peg this right into the back of the tail. And it takes a little bit of pressure to get that fully plugged in, but yeah, that's an incredibly long tail. And just think, on top of that, you're going to peg this into the back of Godzilla. The larger tail, or the larger tail section to Godzilla, there is a couple of peg slots, and then there's slot areas here that you're going to take that. So you take this back section of the tail, you're just going to plug it in to the back of Godzilla. You plug it into the side, and then once it's in place, like so, you're going to twist it. And twisting it will lock the tail into the back of Godzilla. The result is an incredibly long Godzilla. Again, this stretches at 40 inches long. Now consider this if you will. How many toys do you have that are even 40 inches tall? Now take 40 inches and imagine that's the length from the snout of Godzilla to the very end tail, if you can see my hand right there. That is an incredibly long Godzilla. The majority of Godzilla's body feels as if it's a hollow plastic, and again, I can understand why Jakks Pacific went this route as opposed to giving us a completely solid body. For starters, Godzilla would be way too heavy for any normal child, unless they have superhuman strength, a normal child to be able to pick up this toy. And also too, if it was a solid plastic as opposed to a hollow frame, the toy itself would be quite a bit more expensive as well. Impressive head sculpt, to certainly say the least. Godzilla's head is quite nice. Not only is it just the darker kind of blackish gray that his majority of his body is comprised of, but they've gone ahead and they've put an extra wash not only on the face section of Godzilla, but the majority of it is more localized in the chest area. He does actually have articulation in the head as well. And also, to be expected, his mouth opens, showing a very vibrant pink tongue inside. And also, all details such as teeth, and certainly those eyes, have all been included and been painted very nicely indeed. The yellow in the eyes stand out very well against the contrast of the gray and this brown wash. Of the brown wash, you can see where it makes up the majority of Godzilla's stomach chest area, whereas the back of Godzilla has been kept the more familiar gray, this kind of gray-black color. Also, you can see at the top of Godzilla is the spines, and all of them are this rubbery plastic, so you don't have to necessarily worry, A, that they're going to be too sharp, and B, that they would break off. They're very forgiving indeed, and certainly would hold up if a child was going to be playing with Godzilla here. Can we not talk about this tail? Look how long this tail is. And it is sectional, so, you know, where the peg point was, when it was pegged into the body of Godzilla, you can see that it still has another 3-4 sections of tail even still. I can't believe how long this Godzilla is. It's probably even hard to gauge via watching it on video here, but take my word for it, this Godzilla is incredibly long. The tail itself is comprised of just a rubbery plastic. It's also, again, a hollow piece, and each of the sections, both the mid-tail as well as the end tail, are on their own riveted, not really riveted, but hinged joints, allowing the tail to move when you're moving Godzilla. The tail itself, as you saw earlier, doesn't actually have any articulation. In fact, when you rotate the tail, that's when the tail will pop off or tighten it to put it back on. So there is no articulation really in the movement of the tail, but you really wouldn't want to move it anyways, because it would change the lineup of the spikes coming all the way down Godzilla's back and into the tail. Godzilla's articulation, well, we've already discussed the head, but the head once again has a full swivel movement completely around. The mouth opens and closes, which I'm really glad that Jakks Pacific decided to give him an open and closed mouth. I mean, they could have easily just left it as a closed mouth, and it still would have been an impressive toy, but the options of having the mouth open or closed, I mean, it gives you a lot more flexibility to, to pose Godzilla. As for his arms on hinged sockets, though there is very limited movement. As you can see, they only go to about there, and then the arm goes to about there. Now, keeping that in mind, Godzilla is a lizard creature, so really what kind of movement are you going to necessarily do with the toy? For me personally, having the arms really only move to about there doesn't really bother me at all. His hands also are on a swivel joint, so you can have Godzilla asking for money. Personally, if he's going to be asking for money, you just give it to him. Don't even say, what are you going to use the money for? It doesn't really matter. Now, a lizard this tall is asking you for money, just give it to him. Although, for the size of how much money you'd be giving him, I mean, you might as well just offer him like an armored truck. As for the legs are also on a swivel. Not really too much movement, but it does allow Godzilla to stand either upright, or you can have him lunging forward as if he is walking through the city. Also, his really nicely sculpted feet also have a rotation point as well, where you can rotate those feet all the way around. And also, if you're a resident of the city, this is not a view of Godzilla that you want to be seeing coming down on you. As Spot had mentioned before, while a lot of toy companies are thinking smaller scale each and every time, Jakks Pacific is thinking, hey, no, wait a minute, let's start producing things on a larger scale. And through all the properties that they've been producing larger versions of figures for, the most no-brainer, if you ask me, is a produced Godzilla toy. I mean, he is a good scale for smaller toys that you have. I mean, he is a good size. It's something that would be a fun piece to put on a display somewhere and put little city buildings all the way around him as well. If you ask me, the king of large-scale figures, Jakks Pacific, really knocked this out of the park by giving us the king of the monsters. Godzilla really came out so well, and it's one of those pieces that I'm absolutely going to love putting out on display. Today's Toy Spot, we're having a look at quite a large piece today. We're having a look at the Jakks Pacific. We're having a look at the Godzilla, giant Godzilla, 40 inches long. That's pretty long. Thanks for watching as you always do, guys, and certainly stay tuned. Spot's going to have more Toy Spots heading your way. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.